1 second. We are almost live. We are live.
We're live. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody coming together on a
1 second. We are
two.
almost live. We are
Here's
live.
some. Okay, we're good. I appreciate everybody showing up on a Friday at 2 o'clock, and I'll call this meeting of the West Virginia Democratic Party Board of Appeals to order. And I will go ahead and call the roll to establish the presence of a quorum. And let's see, Susan Miley,
Here.
Pam Klein,
Here.
David Thompson,
Here.
and I'm here. We're at full strength. We have a quorum. And we'll begin with old business. At our last meeting, I updated you on the January 2023 Vickers versus West Virginia Federation of Democratic Women grievance. Then the board ruled that the WVFDW needed to comply with national and state party rules regarding open meetings and ensure that their bylaws provide compliance with national and state party rules and report back with updated bylaws to the Board of Appeals. Our first request for this information was not met by January 25th, 2024. That was the deadline that was set. After a follow-up email request, this board received an email from President Pam Van Horn, and we'll schedule a meeting in the near future to review compliance with the ruling of this board. So now move on to move on to new business. And this board received a grievance filed by Jarryd Powell, who is president, chair of the Marion County Democratic Executive Committee, on January 8th versus Jacob Hively, which was forwarded to each of you and Mr. Hively on that date. This board adopted rules of procedure on February 5th, considering that we were in the process of the Powell grievance. We wanted to, as much as possible, follow those rules of procedure with this grievance. But with that in mind, all parties, including Mr. Hively, received an email notification on February 5th informing all parties of the hearing date today. The notification included a copy of the rules of procedure and a request of Hively to provide a response by February 12th. That same notification of hearing, including the rules of procedure and request for response, was sent to Mr. Hively via a certified letter on February 7th. The certified letter was never picked up and is still awaiting pickup at the Charleston Downtown Post Office. Additionally, Executive Director Frankenberry sent 2 follow-up emails with tracking receipts to Mr. Hively, who opened and clicked the emails but did not respond. So as of now, we have not received a written response or any communication at all from Mr. Hively. I'm going to check again. Do we have anybody in the waiting room?
No, sir.
I'm not sure if I can see the waiting room. Yeah, I'm not hosting this. I don't believe so. I can't see that we don't have anybody in the waiting room. But that would mean that Mr. Hively is not here today. So we will move forward with the hearing from our grievant, Mr. Powell. Pursuant to the West Virginia Democratic Party Board of Appeals rules and procedure, each side will have the right to present competent oral and documentary evidence relevant to the specific matters at issue and to conduct cross-examination. The grievant will present their evidence and any witnesses first. The respondent will present their evidence and any witnesses second. Each witness is subject to cross-examination. There is not a time limit on presentations, but we ask that each side be thorough, but also succinct. At the close of the giving of evidence, each side shall be entitled to present oral argument for the Board of Appeals for a period determined by the Board of Appeals, generally not to exceed 15 minutes. Following the close of oral arguments, the members of the board may ask questions of the parties. Following questions from the board may discuss and deliberate, take any action they deem appropriate. After the conclusion of the hearing, the Board of Appeals may either reach a decision or set a briefing schedule for the parties. The Board of Appeals shall make and file a written decision within 30 calendar days of the completion of the hearing or the receipt of the last brief filed, whichever comes later. Which report shall include findings of fact, conclusions of law to include party rules, and a disposition of the grievance. The report shall be served on all parties to the grievance, shall be reported to the West Virginia State Democratic Executive Committee at the next regular meeting, and shall be made available to the public upon request. All decisions made by the Board of Appeals with respect to any issue pertaining to a grievance must be made by vote by a vote in a public meeting. And we'll begin with the grievant. Jarryd Powell. Mr. Powell, the floor is yours to present your evidence.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen now.
Okay.
Members of the West Virginia Democratic Party Board of Appeals, until a few days before December 9th, I, like many others, was unaware of the disheartening truth I'm about to share regarding Hively's tenure as the leader of the West Virginia Young Democrats. For too long, we have been sold a facade of a functioning organization under his presidency. However, the events of December 9th shattered this illusion, revealing the stark reality of a hollow shell masquerading as a legitimate entity. What transpired during and after the December 9th meeting, as detailed in my grievance, comprising of 19 pages of factual information and supported by 20 exhibits of evidence, paints a clear picture of the misrepresentation and mismanagement plaguing the West Virginia Young Democrats under Hively's leadership. For well over a year, Jacob Hively has deceived not only the West Virginia State Executive Committee, county chairs, and college Democrats, but also the young people eagerly seeking to engage in a youth-led democratic movement in our state. Hively's persistent claim to the presidency, despite knowing otherwise, coupled with his failure to fulfill fundamental duties of the position, have resulted in a regression rather than progression for the West Virginia Young Democrats. Under Hively's illegitimate tenure, we have regrettably lost a charter granted to us by the National Young Democrats, a damning testimony to his mismanagement and negligence. Instead of advancing the causes of young Democrats in our state, he has driven our organization into the ground, making it exponentially harder for future legitimate leaders to fulfill their duties. It is imperative that this board decisively addresses the issues raised in my grievance. I submitted to you a grievance detailing the specifics of how Hively embedded himself in the West Virginia Young Democrats and then claimed that he was president. The grievance cites each of the governing rules that was violated and, more importantly, provides evidence of the violations. I would gladly go into each of the details that the board would like. However, with the limited time that I have to present this case, I would like to focus on the evidence of 3 overriding issues. 1. Hively has been misrepresenting himself as the president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. 2. The West Virginia Young Democrats are no longer chartered with the National Young Democrats because of Hively. 3. The December 9th meeting and the officer appointments was an undemocratic farce, and the actions of the fraudulent meeting need to be found null and void. Hively first began his misrepresentation in August 2022 when he began presenting himself as the vice president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. Allegedly, the executive vice president of the West Virginia Young Democrats resigned. There is no evidence of this, and upon information and belief, she never did resign. On the left is the process provided for in the West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution, Exhibit B, for filling vacancies in other officers or vacancies in officers other than the president, my apologies. It states that the president shall appoint a member of the West Virginia Young Democrats in good standing to fulfill the remainder of the term, with the advice and consent of the State Executive Committee. On January 5th, 2024, I asked Executive Director Frankenberry by email, the 2018 West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution requires that the State Executive Committee approve certain things, such as convention dates, officer appointments, etc. Has the State Executive Committee been requested to do any of those things? Frankenberry responded on January 6, 2024 to say the West Virginia SDEC has not received any request for approval of any kind. This is shown in Exhibit K3. So if the process to fill a vacancy wasn't done, what did happen? I was able to obtain screenshots of the group me that the West Virginia Young Democrat officers used. The previous acting president stated in the group me that I have found someone who is not only interested, but who will fill the shoes of the role and who is ready and glad to put in the work. Please give your best welcome to Jacob Hively as our new VP. This is Exhibit J. It is worth noting that the West Virginia Young Democrats have 4 vice president positions and only 1 executive vice president position. Hively was not appointed as the executive vice president. But because the appointments were not done so according to the West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution, no appointment was made. Hively wasn't a vice president, let alone the executive vice president, based on the GroupMe chat. And for anyone to think so is offensive to anyone that understands the Democratic Party as an open party with a fair and democratic process in place. Well, Hively was new. Maybe he didn't understand the rules. Maybe he thought he was legitimately appointed. That might be a reasonable exception, except Hively has publicly said that if someone takes on a position, they should know the rules. Here is a clip from Hively from a hearing before this board on January 18th.
It doesn't matter if he'd been chair for 5 minutes or 5 years. He has a duty when he ran for chair to understand the rules of the committee. He was chair. He chose to run for that. He should have known the rules then.
Assuming that Hively holds himself to the same standards, Hively knew that he was not the vice president and that he was certainly not the executive vice president. On November 19th, 2022, Hively began misrepresenting himself to Democrats as the president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. Here is Exhibit K, an email from Hively to Frankenberry misrepresenting himself as the new Young Dems president. It states, Laura Walker has recently resigned as president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. I'll be filling out the remainder of her term. Here is how the office of president is filled according to the West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution. In the event the president is unable or unwilling to continue his duties, the executive vice president will fulfill the remainder of the outgoing president's term. As shown just a moment ago, Hively was not correctly appointed as anything, let alone the executive vice president. The only way that Hively could, at this point, legitimately become the West Virginia Young Democrats president is if the state executive committee elected him. I refer again to my January 5th email to Frankenberry asking if there had been any such request by the West Virginia Young Democrats. According to Frankenberry's January 6th email, that did not happen. These 2 emails are Exhibit K3. So now we have Hively telling Democrats throughout the state that he is the president of the Young Democrats. On May 23rd, 2023, Hively posted on the GroupMe chat that he was seeking permission to close the United Bank account we currently use and to move it to Truist. The reason is so that the organization can have a debit card and a lower monthly fee. If approved, Chase Jarryd and I will proceed ASAP. This is Exhibit L. 4 days after this post, 2 people responded. One, that she wasn't a voting member. The other, that she was leaving the chat. No one responded to give permission or to hold a vote or to have a discussion. It is also notable that United Bank offers a debit card. It is unclear if Hively moved forward with his plan to close the West Virginia Young Democrats account. However, he certainly did not have the authority to do so. He wasn't the president, and even if he were, he did not have the permission of the other officers on the West Virginia Young Democrats Executive Committee. Perhaps this board may rule that there is an investigation into the finances and see what exactly Hively did. It certainly seems that he may have misrepresented himself to both United Bank and Truist as the president of the West Virginia Young Democrats, and took actions as the president without the authority to do so. There is a fundraising post on the West Virginia Young Democrats Facebook page, so he at least was raising money without proper authorization. He may have spent money without authorization as well. Most banks require a copy of the minutes of a meeting where a chair and or a president is elected. I wonder what paperwork was provided to these 2 banks. The second main point is that because of Hively, the West Virginia Young Democrats are no longer chartered with the Young Democrats of America, the national organization that governs state affiliations. Much of what Hively was doing could have been corrected if he had been honest with the other Young Dem officers and the state party. Appointments of an election could have been held if they had followed the rules, but that didn't happen. One of the most significant things that needed to happen would have been to put the Young Democrats back on track was to have a state convention. The West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution mandates an annual convention and that officers are nominated and elected in odd number years. 2023 was the year to hold officer elections. Article 4 of the West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution provides for the process to hold the annual state convention and to elect officers and charter local clubs. Hively began telling people in November 2022 that he was president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. At no point during 2023 did Hively hold a state convention. Another question that I asked in my January 5th letter was, are there chartered county chapters in West Virginia? Director Frankenberry responded that WVDP has no knowledge of any currently chartered county West Virginia Young Democrats chapters. WVDP requested the information regarding local chapters in an email offering support of the West Virginia Young Democrats on April 12, 2023, but this received no response. Again, this is Exhibit K3. In my January 5th email to Director Frankenberry, Exhibit K3, I specifically asked, is the West Virginia Young Democrats chartered with the YDA? In Frankenberry's response, he stated, according to an email from the YDA president, West Virginia is not currently chartered with the YDA. Their last charter was done in 2021, which expired in 2023, July. Here is a screenshot of the email from the Young Democrats of America president. As you can see, it says, West Virginia is not currently chartered with the YDA. Their last charter was done in 2021 and expired in July. Sophia Mills completed that paperwork, and the last president we had on file before losing contact was Laura Walker. This is Exhibit M. The last issue I want to highlight from the 19-page grievance is the meeting that Hively called and chaired on December 9th. This meeting did not follow the Democratic Party rules, and there were no officers elected. Before we look at all the violations of party rules that Hively did, let's look at the evidence to see a very interesting timeline of events that led to the notice of this meeting. As we can see, at 10:38 a.m., Frankenberry requested that Hively provide West Virginia Young Democrats organizational documents, including the charter minutes, notice of meeting where Hively was elected, officer updates from the YDA, list of officers. Then, at the same day, at 10:42 a.m., Hively responds that he will send the information as soon as possible. Hively then emails at 11:29 a.m. a 30-day notice for West Virginia Young Democrat officer elections. In response to Hively's request for statewide voter access network, VAN access, on November 7th, 2023 at 10:38 a.m., Frankenberry sent Hively an email which requested, please provide the following documents. Current West Virginia Young Democrats Charter, minutes and public notice of the West Virginia Young Democrats State Convention in which you were elected president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. Any correspondence with the Young Democrats of America regarding officer updates. A list of current West Virginia Young Democrat office holders with titles, contact information, and minutes of when they were elected. Frankenberry email. This is Exhibit K2. 4 minutes later at 10:42, Hively responded saying that he will compile all information and send it to the West Virginia Democratic Party as soon as possible. This is Exhibit V. As of January 5th, Hively never provided the information requested by the West Virginia Democratic Party. At 11:29 a.m., exactly 47 minutes later, Hively sent an email noticing the December 9th meeting and election of officers. This is Exhibit N. In the transition email, Hively writes, we'll be electing officers for the next term. This is Exhibit N. The agenda that Hively sent listed the election of officers, including president. This is Exhibit O. I received notice in an agenda email. However, as the day of the meeting came closer and I talked to people about the meeting, I began to understand that there were significant issues with the scheduled meeting. Specifically, I learned that very few people received the email and that it was posted as publicly as available. And for the organization that is targeted to young people, and that one of the 3 social media accounts and their own website, there wasn't any posting of this meeting. This is exhibits P through S. And it wasn't posted on the state party website either. It's almost as if Hively didn't want anyone to know about the meeting or want anyone to run for offices. My email to Hively asked several relevant questions, including a request for the copy of the Constitution, a list of current officers, a list of chartered county groups and members, the things that a member of an organization would ask. I received no answer to my email. This brings us to December 9th, the day of the election of officers. This meeting was held that the agenda had a total of 6 minutes. During that point, I moved a point of order, which was my right as a member, to point out that the meeting was not publicly noticed as required by party rules. Hively refused to rule on my point of order. He had stated that the office of the president was not vacant, which meant he was appointing himself as president for another 2 years. Hively appointed a secretary and parliamentarian. The parliamentarian has stated that they sought a legal opinion and that Hively could appoint officers. Hively proceeded to appoint a slate of officers. There was no election. Someone called to adjourn and I asked for a roll call vote. This was ignored and Hively adjourned the meeting. The Constitution of the West Virginia Young Democrats has an entire article dedicated to the annual state convention in which how officers are elected. Article 4 provides that the election occur in odd number years. The last elected president was Sophia Mills, and her election was during the West Virginia Young Democrat State Convention in 2021. 2023 was the year to hold a convention. Article 4 lays out the process for holding a convention, which includes a 60-day public notice, 3 committees with membership made up of delegates from various Young Dem clubs, appointed of delegates from county clubs, determination of a quorum, rechartering of county clubs, and a bunch of election procedures that include nominations, speeches, balloting, etc. It is all laid out in the West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution. Was any of this followed? No. Not one correct way of upholding elections was done. Not one. So I end where I started. I have shown documentary evidence of the requirements of the governing documents and how over and over again they were violated. I have shown evidence that conversations and emails. I have given my testimony about what happened in the meeting on December 9th. I believe I have presented a clear picture with evidence that 1. Hively has misrepresented himself to the West Virginia Young Democrats and throughout the state to other Democrats as he claimed to be the president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. 2. Because of Hively's actions, West Virginia is no longer chartered with the Young Democrats of America. 3. The meeting on December 9th was undemocratic and the officer appointments were illegal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your detailed presentation. And I guess, you do have a right to call witnesses. Do you have any witnesses you'd like to call?
I do not know.
Okay. At this point, would normally allow for a response. However, once again, Ryan, has anyone showed up in the waiting room yet?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, at this point is when there would be a defense presented, and then we would go on to oral arguments. We'll go ahead and move on to, you have a presentation of an oral argument. Let's keep it under 15 minutes, please.
I do. Thank you. Members of the West Virginia Democratic Party Board of Appeals, I will now present my oral arguments for this grievance. The 3 primary issues that I presented evidence for are 1. Hively's misrepresentation as the vice president and president of the West Virginia Young Democrats. 2. The fact that under Hively's tenure, the West Virginia Young Democrats are no longer chartered with the National Young Democrats of America. And 3. The fact that the December 9th meeting and the officer appointments was undemocratic and violated many party rules, including our own West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution. When I received the email from Hively on November 7th, 2023, announcing the December 9th election of officers, I was excited. I had not been impressed with Hively as president of the West Virginia Young Democrats, but I had no idea of the damage that he had done to the organization. I thought the December 9th meeting was an opportunity to turn the page, elect new officers, and start building the Young Democrats as an organization in West Virginia. I had no idea whatsoever of all the evidence that I have presented earlier today and how thoroughly Hively destroyed our Young Democrats organization. It wasn't until I began to file this grievance and started asking questions that I was able to piece together the timeline of events that led up to the December 9th meeting. It wasn't until after the December 9th meeting that I received a copy of the WV Young Dems Constitution, even though I had requested it of Hively before the December 9th meeting. And I didn't receive it from him. I received it from a member of the College Democrats that happened to find a copy in their email from years ago. I was completely shocked at what I had learned about Hively over the last couple of years. Our timeline starts in August 2022. Hively was allegedly appointed the vice president of the Young Dems. As I showed in the 19-page grievance, Hively could not have been appointed because he could have only done so with the advice and consent of the state executive committee. When I asked if that advice and consent was provided, I learned that the state executive committee never received a request of that nature. I did not go in depth here because of time, but the written grievance also provides evidence that the person claiming to be president of the Young Dems at that time, Laura Walker, was not legitimately elected and did not have the authority to appoint Hively or anyone else. In November 2022, Hively began misrepresenting himself as president of the WV Young Dems. He sent an email to the state party claiming that Laura Walker had resigned and that he was now the president. In May 2023, Hively, at best, began some questionable things related to the Young Democrats' finances. Hively requested that the Young Democrats' bank account be moved from United Bank to Truist, in part to be able to have a debit card. United Bank offers a debit card. This request, which should have been made in a noticed and public meeting, was made in a GroupMe chat. The only reason that the response to the request was two people stating that they weren't officers, and one of them saying that they were leaving the chat. Not one person gave permission for Hively to move the bank account. It is unclear if the bank account was moved. However, the Young Dems Facebook page has a featured fundraising post pinned at the top. Based on the email from the Young Democrats of America president as of July 2023, the West Virginia Young Democrats were not chartered. The West Virginia Young Democrats had maintained their charter for well over a decade. It ended on July 1st, 2023, under the direction of Jacob Hively. At 10:38 a.m. on November 7th, 2023, in response to Hively's request for vote builder access, Director Frankenberry requested that Hively provide some documentation required by the vote builder agreement. This request included the minutes of the West Virginia Young Democrats Convention in which he was elected and a list of current officers. Four minutes later, at 10:42 a.m., Hively responded that I will compile all information and send it to the WVDP as soon as possible. Exactly 47 minutes later, at 11:29 a.m., Hively sent notice of the December 9th meeting and election of officers. To say that the timing of the December 9th meeting is suspicious would be an understatement. I did not learn about this timeline until I began to ask questions related to this grievance. If I had not sent questions to the state party requesting information, I would have never learned that Hively had noticed the meeting for elections less than an hour after the state party requested information about his election. By December 7th, I had discovered from talking to others that there was no public notice for the December 9th meeting. As a chair of a county party and as a former member of the state executive committee, I'm aware that the recognized organizations must follow state and national party rules regarding notice and holding of meetings, specifically public notice and public meetings. I sent an email on December 7th asking these questions, voicing my concern about lack of public notice. I requested a copy of the West Virginia Young Democrats bylaws or constitution. I have never received a response from Hively. The meeting on December 9th has several things on the agenda, including the election of officers, notably the election of a new president. The meeting lasted 6 minutes. During those 6 minutes, Hively announced that the office of president was not open, effectively appointing himself as president for a 2-year term. He then appointed a secretary and parliamentarian, and then appointed a list of other officers. In the meeting, I raised a point of order to address the lack of public notice. Hively refused to rule on my point of order. Instead, he informed me that the parliamentarian had received a legal opinion that Hively can make the appointments. Then Hively rushed through his appointments. Someone then made a motion to adjourn at 6 minutes. I requested a roll call and division. However, Hively ignored that request and adjourned the meeting. I contacted Chair Pushkin after the meeting and asked that he request a copy of the recording of the meeting at 7:01 p.m. Chair Pushkin sent Hively an email with that request. It is my understanding that Hively has not provided that recording. As shown in the timeline, Hively has misrepresented himself as president. Let's look for a moment at what Hively's responsibilities were versus what he actually did. One of the most important things that Hively needed to do was to hold a state convention to elect officers. He had the responsibility to build membership by chartering and rechartering young Democrat clubs in West Virginia, and he needed to follow guidelines to ensure that state Young Dems is reorganized with a national organization. Instead, none of this happened. Based on the evidence presented, we know that Hively did the following. He requested that the Young Dems bank account be moved from one bank to another for the purpose of a debit card, which another bank provides, and requests that people donate to the West Virginia Young Democrats on social media. And then he held an undemocratic meeting that violated so many party rules, the Constitution of the West Virginia Young Democrats, and where he appointed himself as president and appointed other officers. I'd also like to point out that Mr. Hively didn't show up to this meeting today. He did not submit a response to the grievance as requested, which would require him, at the very least, to respond to each allegation and to either confirm or deny them. It is significant that Hively did not do this. Our bylaws, Article 8, Section 2, provides clarity regarding the Board of Appeals of matters of those who fail to appear at a board meeting. It states, any party to the controversy who fails to appear at the duly called meeting without good cause sufficient in law shall be deemed to have abandoned his or her case, and a decision will automatically be entered against him or her. However, based on the evidence presented in this case, I'm asking the BOA to grant the following relief. The grievant requests that the BOA, A, determine that Walker was not properly elected as president of the West Virginia Young Democrats, B, determine that Hively was not properly appointed as executive vice president or otherwise of the West Virginia Young Democrats, C, determine that Hively did not have the authority to claim that he was the president of the West Virginia Young Democrats or act accordingly, D, acknowledge the statement of the president of the YDA, specifically stating that the West Virginia Young Democrats charter expired in July 2023, and therefore no one was authorized to act as a representative of the West Virginia Young Democrats from July 1st, 2023 to the present, and therefore the actions of the December 9th meeting are null and void, and no officers were elected or appointed. E, determined that the December 9th meeting did not comply with the rules and procedures of the DNC's charter, the DNC bylaws, the 6 basic elements of the West Virginia Democratic Party, the West Virginia Democratic Party bylaws, and additionally did not comply with the Young Democrats of America National Charter and the West Virginia Young Democrats Constitution. And therefore, the actions of the December 9th meeting are null and void, and no officers were elected or appointed. And F, find that the West Virginia Young Democrats is not recognized by the national YDA and therefore is not eligible for membership or representation on the State Democratic Executive Committee. And G, and such other relief the BOA considers appropriate. I appreciate your time today to hear the facts of this case and my oral argument. It is my sincere desire to build a strong, vibrant, and youth-led organization within the West Virginia Democratic Party. I gave a lot of thought as to whether or not I should bring forth this grievance or just quit the organization to avoid the hassle. I chose to file this grievance because I was convinced that by not filing it, I would be complicit with things that are fundamentally against what I stand for and what my party stands for. The board needs to decisively address the issues in this grievance so that we can move forward and build a strong, youth-led, democratic organization that will be the future of the Democratic Party in West Virginia. After all I have learned over the last few months, I can tell you that I agree with Jacob Hively on one thing, and that is this is about fairness and following the rules.
What it is about is it's about fairness, about one person, one vote, and more important, it's about following the rules.
Members of the West Virginia Democratic Board of Appeals, I appreciate your time in hearing my oral arguments today. And
We lost you there. Sorry.
oh
What
no,
happened
sorry.
there?
I think I yield the floor back unless there's any questions or the next stage.
Just muted myself. Well, thank you for both of your presentations and for your oral arguments. And at this point, I will open the floor for board members to see if they have any questions. Mr. Powell. Are there any?
I don't have has he communicated with you at all since you've had that meeting?
No.
Didn't you get Young Dem of the Year?
I did, yes.
That's what I thought.
Well, if there are no questions, then we'll move on to a discussion and deliberation.
I can't tell if David was raising his hand. He's muted though.
Oh, I'm sorry, David, did you have any questions?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Was there an actual legal opinion given to the parliamentarian as requested?
That would be a question for Mr. Hively, but I have not been provided any text of a legal opinion. I would also
So there was no written memorandum of it or anything in minutes to show
nothing
that.
distributed. No, correct. There have been no minutes even distributed prior to the December 9th meeting. And to add to this as well, I said in my presentation about requesting on, it was an email prior to the December 9th meeting. I believe it might have been December 7th. I sent a message to him where I requested both the bylaws and other governing documents as be applicable. I believe the party has made this request previously as well. Neither of those have been fulfilled.
Okay. And one other thing, the national charter lapsed in July of 23. Is that what
Yes.
your allegation? Okay. So is essentially you're saying that any act that was taken post July 2023 would be invalid due to the lack of a national charter?
Yes, I believe that would be a fair ruling from this board.
All right, thank you.
Pam?
I guess to consider the impact of this grievance, as well as the impact of the board's decision to the integrity of the West Virginia Young Democrats and the West Virginia Democratic Party. I know that's at the forefront of all of our minds. And since we can't actually ask these questions that we need to ask today, as I understand from our rules, a procedure, we can request evidence that will help us make our decision. It states that the Board of Appeals shall have the authority to order that a party produces designated evidence in the interest of justice at the hearing. Some things that I think I would find helpful are the video recording of the December 9th meeting, bank statements from United Bank and any new bank that may be used by the West Virginia Young Democrats now. This should cover from November 2022 to present. Minutes of the West Virginia Young Democrats meetings or officers meetings since November 2022, and a copy of the legal opinion that was used at the December 9th meeting. I think those would be, in the interest of justice, to have these things prior to making our decisions. If others are agreeable, I'd like to request that we ask Mr. Hively for those items.
Is that a motion?
I'll move that the board order that Mr. Hively provide the recording of the December 9th meeting, bank statements from all banks with accounts of the West Virginia Young Democrats from November 2022 to present, and all minutes to meetings of the West Virginia Young Democrats from November 2022 to present to this board within 24 hours, and that each side may file a brief with the board within 3 calendar days, and that this board adjourn until date and time that we decide.
I'll second that.
Okay. Because we need to decide on a date and time. And also, well, first of all, we could discuss the motion. I guess during the discussion, we can set a date and time. But I just want to go back to the meeting though. So it was the 30-day notice just went to a select group of people through via email.
That's how I received mine. However, I think it'd be better to request, maybe even if he has some type of sent receipts. I don't know how many went through, but I know people that attended the convention, the previous convention in 2022, or 2021, and they did not receive the email for the December meeting. So I'm not sure
How else
necessarily
was it?
what
And
list
how
it
else was it notified?
I only via email.
Just
There was
via
no
email,
public
so
notice, nothing published online.
there was an email sent to a select list. We're going to have a 30-day notice where we're going to elect a slate of officers. Do you know if there were anyone that was trying to get on the meeting that was unable to get on the meeting?
Yes, I do know it was supposed to be a public meeting, and there were people that were left in the Zoom waiting room.
Okay. And no votes were taken except the vote to adjourn, correct?
Correct.
And you roll called the motion. You roll called the vote to adjourn, and
I did.
that was not. There was no response to your call for a roll call.
Yes, and I believe if the 6-minute video were to be provided, you would even then hear at the end, I very distinctly even try calling out different parliamentary terms in order to trigger that roll call, saying nay, division, roll call. All those efforts were in vain though, and the Zoom meeting just ended.
Do you know if it was recorded?
It was. It did start at the beginning and said that it was recorded. Mr. Hively was the host of the meeting. Therefore, he would have the recording of the meeting.
So we do know 6 minutes. We don't know who was notified of the meeting. There were people in the waiting room, so not everybody was allowed to vote, and there wasn't really a vote on any. It was just an appointment of a slate of officers. Okay. Well, any more discussion of the motion? I guess we need part of the motion was to adjourn until a date and time certain. What's everybody's schedule? My schedule's fairly busy. What's everybody else's look like?
I have a quick question too, while we're looking at our calendars.
Okay, go ahead.
Because he's not present, he automatically loses this grievance. Do we have to address that in any way as far as a motion within our group, or is that just an accepted? Because I'm just thinking that should we table this motion, accept the fact that and I'm just asking because I truly don't know, kind of deal with that part that he's lost this grievance first officially due to not showing up, and then going to asking for the documentations that we need. So then we kind of are addressing secondly how to address making this right. You know what I mean? So I'm just questioning. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it is an automatic. I mean, if you don't show up to defend it, I mean, the bylaws speak to that. I don't think that it would be the correct move would be to. And there is no motion to table the motion. So, and I don't think that would be the right move anyway. I think that there's a motion that's basically asking for more information. And then I think our final the final ruling would incorporate that that basically forfeited his right by not showing up. I think that would be
Okay, so that's kind of like an automatic thing right now. That's that issue is already resolved. We're now just trying to
that's
figure out how to
automatic. But
remedy.
the motion before us is a request for the recording of the December 9th meeting, bank statements from all banks with the West Virginia Young Dems from November 22nd to present, and minutes to meetings from November 22 to present. And I believe it was to be provided to the board within 24 hours, and that each side may file a brief with the board within 3 calendar days, and then that we would set another time and date to discuss that. But it's basically a request for information.
I would just add to that that's in the spirit of dotting every I and crossing every T as the Board of Appeals, to make sure that he has been giving every avenue to come and bring the information that we've requested before we make our final decision.
I also think it's important that we get that
I
if
agree.
it's not being audited and addressed within the actual Young Dems, that's pretty important stuff to have. And I don't know outside of this grievance board. I mean, I think that's important stuff to get. If we're looking at the next 3 days, I am traveling on the 20th. I'm actually going to be in a car though. We have to fly out of Charleston on Tuesday morning at 11, but I'll be traveling from North Central down there, so I could actually do something in the car if I need to. And then the 21st, I'll be in Florida the 21st and the 22nd as well. I'll be in meetings on the 23rd and the 24th, and then available on the 25th. So I don't know how everybody else's calendar is looking.
Crowded.
David, what's yours like?
Do you have a prospective date?
Well, I mean, the legislature's in session, so everything kind of
Right.
possibly
on.
do.
When
I
is
could
the last
possibly do
day?
Wednesday morning, the morning of the 21st. Let's say at 9:30.
Can't do the 21st.
Can't do the 21st.
Do you need me? I mean, I guess you do, because yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll see it. Let's try some other dates. I'd like to have everybody. If not, we could do it with a quorum. I mean, as long as we have a quorum. What about the afternoon of the 21st? Like,
Yeah, I have a bankruptcy hearing.
Okay. Well, and you said the 22nd's out, Susan?
I could do, if we do things first thing in the morning, I could do it because, but it'd have to be like before the day starts.
I can
like
do
8 o'clock.
I could do that on the 22nd.
I could do that early morning on the 22nd.
Yeah.
What time?
8.
8. Jesus.
I was thinking 7. I was
I'd be right there with you, Susan.
Were you really?
Get up early. That works for me.
Okay.
All right.
we broke it.
Any further discussion of the motion?
Just to be clear, what was the time again?
8 a.m.
8 a.m. on the
Thursday,
22nd.
Thursday, the 22nd.
Okay.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Well, included in that motion was adjournment. So, that's it. it said at the end, it said, we adjourn until that date. So we'll see everybody on Thursday. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Jarryd, thanks for showing up and stating your case. I appreciate that and the work that you put into that. And everybody else, thanks for being here and